The scent of gardenias and freshly pressed linen hung heavy in the air, a cloying sweetness that threatened to suffocate me. I sat in the front row of the opulent ballroom, my floral dress a deliberate choice, designed to blend into the sea of polite smiles and celebratory chatter. My daughter, Sarah, a vision in white, floated down the aisle, her eyes shining with a joy that felt both beautiful and utterly naive. My lips were curved into what I hoped was a convincing motherly smile, but inside, a glacier was forming, a cold, hard knot of apprehension. No one in this grand hall, surrounded by crystal chandeliers and expensive champagne, knew the truth I carried. A truth worth a staggering $120 million. I had kept quiet about it. Thank God I had. Because even as I watched my only child marry Jason, a man I instinctively distrusted, I knew he wasn't who he seemed. And I knew that the beachfront villas, the last, precious legacy my beloved Robert had left me, would become his next target. I kept my silence that day. And thank heaven for that gut feeling, because exactly 1 week later, Jason appeared on my modest doorstep, a slick lawyer by his side, ready to take everything. My little house, nestled among overgrown roses and towering oak trees in a quiet suburban cul-de-sac, was a sanctuary of routine. Morning coffee on the porch, the rustle of the newspaper, the gentle creak of the swing. It was a life built on simplicity, a conscious choice after Robert's passing, a deliberate retreat from the demands of his empire. Most people saw a sweet, slightly eccentric widow, content with her garden and her memories. They saw an aging woman whose biggest worry might be a persistent squirrel in her bird feeder. And that was precisely how I wanted it to be. Robert, bless his foresightful soul, had always been a man of quiet power. He built his fortune from the ground up, with a shrewdness tempered by a deep-seated caution. Evelyn, he'd often say, his hand warm over mine, wealth is a double-edged sword. It attracts all manner of creatures, some beautiful, some truly venomous. His words echoed in my mind as I watched Jason at the rehearsal dinner, his eyes not quite meeting mine when he spoke of his love for Sarah. He was charming, of course, almost too charming. He complimented my dress, asked about my health, even offered to help with some minor repairs around my house. But beneath the polished veneer, I felt a calculating hunger. He asked about my plans for retirement, casually inquired about any investments Robert might have made. Innocent questions, perhaps, but the way he lingered on them, the subtle shift in his gaze, set off a silent alarm bell deep within me. That alarm grew louder when he spoke of Sarah's future, their big plans together. He painted a picture of grand ambition, of moving to the city, of starting a new life. There was no mention of family, no quiet appreciation for what Sarah already had. It was all about what they could acquire. I saw it then, clear as day, a shadow falling over the vibrant promise of Sarah's wedding day. The image of those serene villas, bathed in the golden light of a setting sun, flashed before my eyes. Robert had built them not just as investments, but as our shared dream, our secret escape, a testament to a life well lived and loved. They were more than just property, they were the very essence of our shared history. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that I could not, would not, allow them to fall into Jason's hands. The secret, then, had to remain just that. A secret. My heart ached for Sarah, but a mother's instinct, honed by 72 years of living and loving, told me this was the only way. My memories of Robert were a mosaic, some pieces bright and vivid, others softened by the passage of time, yet all held together by the strong adhesive of love and respect. He was a man of quiet power, yes, but also of deep compassion. We built our life together from humble beginnings, each brick laid with careful thought and hard work. Robert, though, carried a ghost from his youth, a significant inheritance lost through the naivete of his family and the predatory nature of opportunistic relatives. It had shaped him, making him not just successful, but extraordinarily prudent, almost to the point of paranoia when it came to financial matters and legal protections. He always said, "Evelyn, money, like water, will always find the path of least resistance. Make sure your path is a fortress." The beachfront villas were not just structures of glass and stone. They were the embodiment of our shared dream, the tangible proof of a life carved out of determination and devotion. There were two of them, nestled side by side on a secluded stretch of Florida coastline, each with its own private slice of pristine sand. We had poured our hearts into their creation, from the sprawling verandas perfect for watching the sunrise, to the sun-drenched kitchens where we'd cooked countless meals. They weren't ostentatious, but they exuded an understated elegance, a serene comfort. They were our sanctuary, our escape from the demanding world Robert navigated. More than just an investment, they were our secret place, a haven where we envisioned spending our golden years, watching the pelicans dive and the waves whisper their ancient secrets. Then Jason entered Sarah's life, a whirlwind of manufactured charm and calculated smiles. It was too fast, that's what bothered me most. A whirlwind romance, a proposal within months, a rushed wedding. My mother's intuition, usually a gentle hum, became a frantic siren whenever he was near. He was undeniably handsome, with an easy laugh and a way of making Sarah feel like the most adored woman in the world. But I saw the flicker in his eyes, a brief, predatory glint that belied the warmth of his smile. He seemed to consume rather than connect. He visited my little house, ostensibly to get to know me better, but his gaze swept over my modest living room, lingered a moment too long on the antique, but not particularly valuable sideboard. "It's so quaint, Evelyn," he'd said, a patronizing tone barely disguised. "Don't you ever feel like you need more space? Something grander?" He spoke of my modest lifestyle, of how I deserved to be taken care of. His words were laced with an unsettling curiosity about my financial standing, about any untapped potential I might have. He even offered, with a practiced sincerity, to help me manage my affairs if I ever felt overwhelmed. He knew, I suspected, that Robert had been a man of means, and he was clearly trying to gauge how much of that wealth had been passed on to me. The thought made my skin crawl. It was during one of Robert's last lucid moments, his breath shallow, his hand trembling in mine, that he'd urged me to take the final, crucial steps. "Evelyn," he whispered, his voice raspy, "my will, it's all there, but make it airtight. Use Hendricks. He knows my mind. Protect our legacy." Mr. Hendricks, a man as old and weathered as Robert himself, had been our family lawyer for decades, a man of uncompromising integrity and shrewd legal mind. He had meticulously followed Robert's instructions, transferring the deeds of the villas, along with certain other assets, into a complex trust, specifically designed to be impenetrable. It wasn't about hiding money from Sarah, it was about protecting it, and by extension, her future, from those who might seek to exploit it. It had been a difficult, emotionally draining process, signing away what felt like direct ownership, but Robert's wisdom had prevailed. I had ensured that only I, through the explicit and irrefutable terms of the trust, had access. That foresight, born of Robert's past pain and my growing unease about Jason, was the only thing that gave me a fragile sense of peace. The day itself was a blur of white lace, champagne flutes, and the sweet, almost overwhelming scent of white roses. The grand ballroom, transformed into a fairy tale setting, buzzed with the excited murmur of guests. Music swelled, a classical piece that usually brought a lump to my throat, but today it felt distant, muted by the clatter of my own anxieties. I tried, truly I did, to lose myself in the joy of the occasion. Sarah, my beautiful Sarah, looked radiant, her eyes sparkling with a happiness I desperately wanted to believe in. But every time my gaze drifted to Jason, standing tall and handsome by her side, a chill snaked through me. He was playing the part of the devoted groom perfectly, his smile unwavering, his hand gently clasped around Sarah's. Yet I saw the performative nature of it, the slight stiffness in his posture, the way his eyes darted around the room, assessing, calculating. During a brief lull in the reception, I managed to pull Sarah aside, near a towering floral arrangement. Her face glowed, a flush of happiness and perhaps a little too much celebratory bubbly. "Darling," I began, my voice softer than I intended, "you look absolutely stunning. I'm so happy for you." She hugged me tightly, smelling of expensive perfume and fresh hope. "Oh, Mom, isn't it perfect?" I'm so incredibly happy. I tightened my grip slightly, trying to convey an unspoken warning. Just promise me you'll always keep your wits about you, my love. Even in happiness, a clear head is a valuable thing. She pulled back, a faint frown creasing her brow. Mom, don't be silly. What are you talking about? Today is perfect. Don't worry so much. She dismissed my veiled caution with a wave of her hand and a laugh, her gaze already drifting back to Jason, who was now holding court with a group of Sarah's college friends. My heart sank. She was too enraptured, too blinded by the dream she was living to hear the quiet alarm in my voice. Later, as the evening wore on and the dance floor filled, Jason sought me out. He moved with an easy confidence, a glass of amber liquid in his hand. Evelyn, he said, his voice smooth, almost purring. A truly magnificent affair. Sarah has excellent taste, a credit to her upbringing, I'm sure. He flashed a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Now that we're family, Evelyn, truly family, I feel we should be closer. You know, look out for each other. He paused, taking a sip of his drink, his gaze sweeping over me with an unnerving intensity. Robert was a successful man. I'm sure he made sure you were well taken care of. And now, with me around, you won't have to worry about a thing. I can help manage any assets you might have. You know, make sure they're working for you. We're a team now, aren't we? His words, delivered with such practiced sincerity, were like a cold slap. Any assets? The phrase hung in the air, heavy with unspoken intent. The way his eyes gleamed, just for a fleeting moment, confirmed every one of my darkest suspicions. He wasn't merely being solicitous. He was prospecting. He was subtly, yet persistently, digging for information, attempting to gain access. I felt a surge of cold fury, quickly masked by a serene smile. Jason, that's very kind of you, I said, my voice sweet, almost frail. But Robert was always very particular about my affairs. Everything is quite in order, thank you. Just my little house and my modest savings, enough to keep me comfortable. Nothing for a strapping young man like yourself to worry about. I added a small, deprecating laugh. He chuckled, a sound that lacked genuine amusement. Of course, Evelyn. Just looking out for my new mother-in-law. It's what family does. He lingered for a moment longer, his eyes searching mine, as if trying to discern the truth behind my placid facade. But I gave him nothing. Only the gentle, slightly bewildered smile of an elderly woman who found financial matters rather tiresome. He eventually excused himself, moving on to another group of guests, leaving me alone with the clinking of glasses and the hollow echo of his words. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. Sarah's happiness, so fragile and fleeting, was built on a foundation of lies and manipulation. How could I protect her from this predator without shattering her world? The dilemma was agonizing. To reveal Jason's true nature would be to inflict a pain upon her that I could barely contemplate. But to remain silent, to allow him to slowly unravel our lives, was unthinkable. The villas, Robert's legacy, our history, were not just a financial holding. They were a shield, a last bastion against the encroaching darkness. And in that moment, standing amidst the fading glory of my daughter's wedding, my resolve hardened. I would protect them. And in doing so, I would protect Sarah, even if it meant she would resent me for a time. My quiet exterior might fool some, but beneath it beat the heart of a lioness, ready to defend her cub. The week that followed Sarah's wedding was a strange kind of limbo. The house, usually a repository of quiet rhythms, felt restless, charged with an unspoken tension. I tried to resume my routines, pruning the roses, baking bread, losing myself in a good book, but my mind kept circling back to Jason's glinting eyes, his carefully chosen words. Each morning, I'd wake with a sense of dread, the peaceful hum of the neighborhood seeming to mock the churning anxiety in my stomach. Was I imagining things? Was my mother's intuition, sharpened by years of protecting Sarah, now overactive, painting a villain where there was only an ambitious young man? I desperately wanted to believe so, for Sarah's sake. Then came the knock. It wasn't a tentative tap or the familiar rap of the mailman. It was a firm, almost imperious series of thuds that vibrated through the old oak door, shaking the dust from the forgotten trinkets on my mantelpiece. My heart leaped into my throat. I glanced at the grandfather clock in the hall, 10:30 on a Tuesday morning. Too early for a friendly call, too aggressive for a solicitor. I walked to the door, my steps surprisingly steady, a strange sense of resignation settling over me. I peered through the peephole. Jason. And beside him, a man in a sharply tailored suit, holding a slim leather brief. Young, probably in his late 30s, with an air of predatory confidence and a perfectly coiffed head of hair. A lawyer. Just as I had anticipated, the chill returning to my bones. I opened the door a crack enough to see their faces, but not enough to feel exposed. Jason? What a surprise. Is everything all right? I feigned a mild bewilderment, the slightly confused elderly woman caught off guard. Jason offered a smile, a little too wide, a little too practiced. Evelyn, so good to see you. I hope we're not disturbing you. This is Mr. Caldwell, my, attorney. He gestured to the slick man beside him. Mr. Caldwell gave me a curt nod, his eyes already assessing, calculating. He wasn't interested in pleasantries. Attorney? I questioned, letting a touch of genuine alarm seep into my voice. Oh dear. Has something happened with Sarah? No, Evelyn, nothing like that, Jason quickly reassured me, though his gaze shifted nervously. This is about other matters. Family matters. Perhaps we could come in. I hesitated, my mind racing. To refuse them entry might seem suspicious. To let them in, an invitation into my sanctuary. I settled for a compromise, opening the door wider, but remaining firmly positioned in the entryway, effectively blocking passage into the main part of the house. Well, I suppose for a moment. But I wasn't expecting company, and I'm just about to put the kettle on. They stepped into the small foyer, filling the space with their aggressive energy. Mr. Caldwell didn't bother with small talk. He launched straight in, his voice smooth and devoid of warmth. Mrs. Reed, my client, Mr. Thorne, has recently come into some information regarding certain assets that were, shall we say, not fully disclosed in Mr. Reed's estate filings. I blinked, feigning a slow processing of his words. Assets? Oh, you mean Robert's will? That was all settled years ago. My house here and a small trust for my daily needs. Nothing complicated, I assure you. I clutched my hands together, allowing them to tremble ever so slightly. Jason interjected, his voice attempting a conciliatory tone, but with an underlying edge of impatience. Evelyn, darling, we understand you might be overwhelmed by these things. But we're talking about significant properties. Specifically, 2 beachfront villas in Boca Grande. Properties that, it seems, were somehow overlooked. My heart hammered against my ribs, but my face remained a carefully constructed mask of innocent surprise. Boca Grande? Villas? Oh, my word. Robert had so many business dealings. I wouldn't know the first thing about such properties. Are you quite sure? I widened my eyes, letting a hint of confusion flicker in them. Mr. Caldwell stepped forward, his voice hardening. Mrs. Reed, we have information, quite reliable information, that these properties, valued at approximately $120 million, are currently held in a trust that names you as the sole beneficiary and manager. This trust was established shortly before Mr. Reed's passing, outside the scope of his main will, and appears to be an attempt to circumvent certain probate regulations. Now that Mr. Thorne is family, we believe it's only fair that these assets be properly accounted for and, indeed, shared with the rest of the family. His words were a thinly veiled threat. Circumvent probate. Shared with the rest of the family. He was implying illegality and a claim to what was rightfully mine. Shared. I echoed, my voice barely a whisper, as if genuinely distressed. But why? Robert made sure I was provided for. These villas, if they even exist, I know nothing about them. My Robert would never do anything improper. Jason moved closer, placing a hand on my arm, a gesture that felt more like a possessive claim than comfort. Evelyn, please. We're not accusing you of anything. We just want to ensure everything is above board. If you cooperate now, voluntarily transfer the management of these properties to a new family trust, perhaps with myself as a co-trustee, we can avoid a lot of unpleasantness. Lengthy legal battles, public scrutiny, the kind of things that can be very taxing on someone your age. The unspoken threat hung in the air. We will drag you through hell if you don't comply. I pulled my arm away gently, my eyes fixed on Jason's. Taxing indeed, I murmured. But I assure you, young man, my memory is still quite sharp, despite my years. And I remember Robert telling me that everything was perfectly in order, perfectly legal. He always did things by the book. And I trust his judgment implicitly. I met Mr. Caldwell's gaze head-on, my own eyes, though perhaps a little watery, now held a glint of steel. I have nothing to hide because I have nothing to claim beyond what Robert already settled for me. If there are these villas, then they are not mine to discuss. You must be mistaken. Mr. Caldwell's jaw tightened. He hadn't expected such a calm, if seemingly naive, dismissal. He exchanged a look with Jason, a silent communication of annoyance and surprise. Mrs. Reed, we have documents. We have proof. Then you'll have to take that up with Robert's lawyer, won't you? I replied, my voice gaining a subtle firmness. He handled all of Robert's affairs and mine. Mr. Hendricks. I believe his office is still on Elm Street. A very competent man. I gave them another sweet, grandmotherly smile. Now, if you'll excuse me, my kettle is whistling. I really must insist you leave. I'm quite flustered by all this talk of villas. And I certainly don't appreciate being threatened in my own home. I took a small step forward, subtly guiding them towards the door. Jason, momentarily thrown by my composure, hesitated. Mr. Caldwell, however, recovered quickly. This isn't over, Mrs. Reed, he stated, his voice a low growl. Consider this a formal notice. We will be in touch. I'm sure you will, I replied, my smile unwavering, even as my hands clenched into fists behind my back. I watched them walk down my path, Jason's shoulders hunched in frustration, Mr. Caldwell already pulling out his phone. The door clicked shut behind them, plunging my foyer back into its usual quiet. But the quiet was shattered now. The battle had officially begun. And I, Evelyn Reed, the seemingly frail widow, felt a surge of adrenaline, a cold, focused anger that sharpened every one of my senses. They had underestimated me. Big mistake. The moment the lock clicked into place, sealing out Jason and his shark of an attorney, I felt the carefully constructed facade begin to crumble. My hands, which had been so steady just moments before, now trembled violently. I leaned against the cool wood of the door, taking deep, ragged breaths, trying to quell the frantic beating of my heart. The kettle, forgotten in the heat of the confrontation, let out a piercing shriek from the kitchen. I turned it off mechanically, the steam hissing a protest. This was it. The polite veneer had been stripped away, and the game had begun. And it was no longer a game of quiet observation, but a full-blown war. My first coherent thought, once the adrenaline began to recede, was of Mr. Hendricks. Robert's rock, my steadfast legal anchor. He was probably older than I was, a man whose wisdom was etched in the deep lines around his eyes and the slight stoop of his shoulders, but whose mind remained as sharp as any young litigator's. He had been a friend to Robert, not just a lawyer, and had understood Robert's unique blend of ambition and profound caution better than anyone. I fumbled with my ancient rotary phone, my fingers, usually nimble from years of knitting, feeling clumsy and stiff. After a brief conversation with his secretary, a woman whose voice sounded like she'd been working for Mr. Hendricks since before I was born, I secured an appointment for that very afternoon. Bring all the relevant paperwork, Mrs. Reed, she'd said, her tone as dry as autumn leaves. Mr. Hendricks expects you'll have a great deal to discuss. She knew. She always knew. Mr. Hendricks's office was a relic of a bygone era. Dark wood paneling, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves overflowing with dusty leather-bound volumes, and the faint, comforting scent of old paper and pipe tobacco. He sat behind a massive mahogany desk, a green banker's lamp casting a warm glow on his meticulously organized stacks of papers. He rose slowly as I entered, a gesture of old-world courtesy, and offered me a weary but genuine smile. "Evelyn, I had a feeling you'd be calling soon after the wedding." "You did?" I asked, sinking into the plush leather chair opposite him, a sense of immense relief washing over me. He nodded, adjusting his spectacles. Robert was a good man, but he made enemies, as all successful men do. And he was very, very careful about his legacy, especially after his family's unfortunate experience when he was a young man. He paused, letting the unspoken tragedy hang in the air for a moment. "He spent years perfecting the structure of those villas, Evelyn, making them absolutely impregnable, legally speaking. He foresaw scenarios like this." I explained the confrontation with Jason and Mr. Caldwell, recounting their threats and insinuations. Mr. Hendricks listened patiently, occasionally stroking his chin, his eyes shrewd and unblinking. When I finished, he let out a slow sigh. "Just as I thought. They're fishing. Hoping to intimidate you into revealing something, anything, they can use to pry open the trust." He picked up a thick file from his desk, tapping it gently. "But Robert and I tied every knot, Evelyn. Every single one. The trust is ironclad. It's a grantor trust, fully funded, irrevocably established. It names you as the sole beneficiary during your lifetime, with extremely specific instructions for its disposition upon your passing, entirely separate from your main will. There are no loopholes for a greedy son-in-law to exploit." He elaborated, his voice precise, on the intricacies of the legal framework. How the villas were not subject to probate in the same way as Robert's other assets, how they were protected from any challenges to his general will, and how Jason's claim that it was an attempt to circumvent regulations was baseless. It was a masterpiece of legal engineering, designed to withstand exactly this kind of assault. My initial relief deepened into a powerful sense of vindication. Robert, even in death, was still protecting me. Over the next few weeks, the promised legal assault began. Letters from Mr. Caldwell arrived, thick envelopes filled with official-looking jargon, demanding financial disclosures, threatening discovery motions, hinting at fraud. Each time, I took them straight to Mr. Hendricks. He, in turn, dispatched his own meticulously worded replies, each one a polite, but firm, brick in our defensive wall. He denied access to the trust's details, cited privacy laws, and reiterated the unimpeachable legality of the trust's formation. It was a slow, grinding battle of wills, fought with paper and legal precedent. But I wasn't just relying on Mr. Hendricks's formidable legal prowess. Robert had taught me a thing or two about observation, about looking beyond the surface. While Mr. Hendricks handled the official correspondence, I embarked on my own quiet, less conventional investigation. Jason had been too slick, too perfect. Nobody was that perfect. There had to be cracks in his veneer somewhere. I started with small things. Discreet inquiries at the local library, using their public access computers. I learned how to navigate online public records, a new and surprisingly absorbing skill for a woman of my age. I looked for marriage licenses, divorce records, property transactions under the name Jason Thorne. The initial searches yielded nothing directly incriminating under his current name, which only deepened my suspicion. A man with his ambition, his obvious comfort with wealth, should have a more visible past. It was almost too clean. It was during one of my afternoon walks, past the old municipal building, that an idea sparked. Martha Davies. An old friend from my garden club, a woman with a quick wit and an even quicker finger on the pulse of local gossip. More importantly, Martha worked as a clerk in the county records office, a position that gave her access to a treasure trove of information, the kind that didn't always make it into official, easily searchable databases. Martha was a stickler for rules, but she also had a soft spot for me, and a healthy distrust of anyone who seemed too good to be true. A few days later, over tea and my homemade lemon cake, I cautiously broached the subject with Martha. "Martha, my dear, a rather delicate matter," I began, choosing my words carefully. "My daughter's new husband, Jason, he seems like a lovely boy, of course. But some things he said, well, they don't quite add up. I was wondering if, purely out of curiosity, you ever came across his name in your work." Perhaps under a different spelling? Or an older address? Martha, bless her curious heart, knew instantly that I wasn't asking about gardening tips. Her eyes, usually twinkling with mischief, narrowed slightly. Oh, Evelyn. Sounds like trouble wrapped in a bow. What kind of different spelling are we talking about? I smiled, a genuine smile this time, seeing a glimmer of hope. Well, anything that looks off. Any prior marriages, perhaps, that weren't mentioned? Just a mother's silly worries, you understand. Martha patted my hand. Silly worries, indeed. But if anyone knows how to find a needle in a haystack, it's me. Give me a few days, Evelyn. No promises, mind you. But I'll poke around. For you. And so, the quiet machinations began. While Jason and his lawyer continued their legal broadsides, I, Evelyn Reed, the unassuming widow, started digging, carefully and methodically, into the murky depths of my son-in-law's past. The battle for the villas was far from just a legal one. It was a battle for truth. Martha, a woman who treated public records like an intricate crossword puzzle, delivered the first crucial piece of the puzzle over a discreet phone call a week later. Her voice, usually chirpy, was hushed with a hint of grim satisfaction. Evelyn, my dear, I found something. Or rather, someone's. A couple of unfortunate discrepancies, as I like to call them. She had tracked down 2 previous marriages for a Jason Thorne, with a slightly different spelling in different states. Both had ended in swift, financially ruinous divorces for the wives, with Jason walking away significantly richer. Even more damning were the whispers of a third engagement that had mysteriously dissolved after the woman's family began to ask too many questions about Jason's non-existent business ventures. He's a ghost, Evelyn, Martha had concluded. He moves, he changes the spelling of his name just enough to muddy the waters, and he preys. Always on women of means, or women with access to means, who are too blinded by his charm to see past it. The phone call ended, but the echo of her words reverberated through my quiet house. He preys. It was confirmation of my darkest fears, a chilling validation of every instinct that had screamed at me to keep the villa's secret. Jason wasn't just ambitious. He was a professional opportunist, a calculated predator. The pattern was unmistakable, a grotesque blueprint of deceit and exploitation. He had chosen Sarah not for love, but for what he perceived she or her family could provide. A profound anguish settled over me. How could I tell Sarah? How could I shatter the idyllic world she believed she had just built? The thought of her face, twisted with pain and betrayal, was almost unbearable. My heart ached with a mother's fierce protectiveness, a desperate need to shield her from such a devastating truth. She loved him, or at least she believed she did. To expose him was to expose her to a heartbreak that could scar her for years. I paced my small living room, the familiar scent of potpourri suddenly feeling cloying, suffocating. My mind raced, weighing the options: protect her from the immediate pain, or protect her from a lifetime of ruin. The answer, though agonizing, was clear. I had to expose him. For her future. The pressure from Jason, meanwhile, was escalating. The legal letters from Mr. Caldwell became more aggressive, more accusatory. They now openly hinted at involving Sarah, suggesting that she might be implicated in my alleged attempts to hide assets. Jason, too, began to subtly turn Sarah against me. She started calling more frequently, her voice edged with a strange mix of confusion and resentment. Mom, Jason says Mr. Caldwell found some old financial records, things about Dad's business. He thinks you're being unfair, not sharing everything with me. He says you're hiding things, maybe even from me, she'd said one evening, her voice trembling. Darling, there's nothing to hide, I'd replied, trying to keep my voice calm, steady. Your father's affairs were always very straightforward. And everything he left for me, for my comfort, is exactly where it should be. Jason simply doesn't understand how these things work. But he says it's millions, Mom. Why would you keep that from us? From your own daughter. Her voice cracked, and I could hear the tears welling up. The pain in her voice was a dagger to my heart. Jason's manipulation was working. He was twisting her love and trust for me into suspicion and resentment, painting me as the selfish, secretive parent. It was during one particularly difficult call, where Sarah accused me of not trusting her, of putting money before family, that my internal conflict reached its peak. The words stung, burning tears in my own eyes. But as I listened to her confused, wounded accusations, I realized something vital. If I didn't act, Jason wouldn't just take the villas, he would take Sarah's spirit, her sense of self-worth, and her ability to trust. He would leave her emotionally bankrupt. The villas, in that moment, became more than just property. They became a symbol of her independence, her future. My resolve hardened, melting away the last vestiges of doubt. The gentle, demure widow who preferred her garden to the boardroom was gone. In her place, a different Evelyn emerged, a woman steeled by a lifetime of quiet resilience and an unwavering maternal instinct. I would fight him, not just with lawyers, but with every ounce of cunning and strength I possessed. I would protect my daughter, even if she hated me for it in the short term. The truth, however painful, was her only shield against the deceit that threatened to consume her. I would gather every scrap of information, every piece of evidence, and I would lay bare the rotten core of Jason Thorne for the world, and most importantly, for Sarah to see. The time for quiet maneuvers was over. It was time for a reckoning. The tension in my home was now a palpable thing, a suffocating blanket woven from legal threats and my daughter's growing distress. Sarah's calls, once filled with her customary cheer and light-hearted gossip, had become fraught with accusation and a raw, trembling despair. Jason had done his work well. He had painted me as the villain, the avaricious mother hoarding a vast fortune from her own child, a woman who somehow didn't trust her newlywed daughter with her own inheritance. One evening, the phone rang and it was Sarah, her voice choked with sobs. "Mom, please." "Jason, he's furious. He says we're going to lose everything because you won't cooperate. He says Mr. Caldwell is talking about a court order, about freezing accounts, about public hearings. He says you're trying to ruin us." Her words tumbled out, a torrent of fear and pain. "He says I should have listened to him when he told me you were being secretive. He says you're jeopardizing our entire future, Mom. Why are you doing this?" My heart fractured into 1,000 pieces. The agony in her voice was sharper than any legal threat. Jason wasn't just attacking my assets. He was attacking the very bond between us, twisting her love into a weapon against me. It was a vicious, calculated move, designed to isolate me, to force my hand. "Sarah, my love, listen to me," I tried, my voice thick with unshed tears. "None of this is true. Jason is manipulating you. Your father and I, we put things in place to protect you, to protect our family. This man, he is not who you think he is." "How can you say that, Mom?" she cried, her voice rising in pitch. "He's my husband. He loves me. And he's just trying to protect our future, to make sure we have what we deserve. But you're making everything impossible. He says if you just came clean, if you just shared what Dad left you, all of this would stop." The insidious nature of his deceit truly hit me then. He wasn't just after money. He was dismantling her trust, her perception of reality. He had created a narrative where I, her own mother, was the antagonist, and he, the conniving predator, was her savior. The idea of coming clean to Jason, of revealing the intricate protections Robert and Mr. Hendricks had put in place, was unthinkable. It would be like handing a wolf the keys to the henhouse. He would devour everything, leaving Sarah utterly defenseless. "Sarah," I began again, my voice trembling but firm, "there are things about Jason that you don't know. Things that would explain why I must be so careful. But I can't tell you over the phone, not now. He might be listening. Just trust me, my darling. Your mother has only ever wanted what is best for you. But her trust was already eroded." "Trust you," she wailed. "Mom, he's threatening to leave me if I don't convince you to cooperate. He says he can't be with someone whose family is trying to ruin him. What am I supposed to do? I just got married. I love him." The desperate cry, "I love him," echoed in the silence that followed, a heartbreaking testament to her blind faith. I closed my eyes, tears finally streaming down my face. My daughter, my bright, optimistic Sarah, was trapped. trapped by a man who saw her only as a means to an end, and trapped by her own innocent belief in his fabricated devotion. In that moment, the vision of the beachfront villas shifted. They were no longer just Robert's legacy or a place of peace. They had become a fortress, a last line of defense, not just for money, but for Sarah's very essence. The maternal instinct, which had whispered cautions at the wedding, now roared to life. This wasn't just about property anymore. It was about protecting my daughter from complete and utter devastation. If I allowed Jason to succeed, he would bleed her dry, financially and emotionally. He would leave her a hollow shell, and I, her mother, would have stood by and watched it happen. The thought was unbearable. The pain of knowing I had to inflict even more pain on her, to shatter her world to save her from a far greater ruin, was an almost physical ache. But my resolve, born of that ache, became unyielding. I would not let him win. I would not allow him to destroy my daughter. The path ahead would be fraught with tears and accusations, with the agonizing betrayal she would feel when I finally laid bare the truth about her husband. But it was a path I had to walk. I would expose Jason Thorne, completely and irrevocably, no matter the cost to my own heart. The lioness was now fully awake, and she would fight for her cub with every fiber of her being. The silence after Sarah's distraught call was not empty, it was filled with the metallic tang of purpose. The tears had dried, leaving a faint salty residue on my cheeks, but they had also washed away the last vestiges of my indecision. My daughter needed saving, and I was the only one who could do it. The time for polite defense was over. It was time for an offensive. I called Mr. Hendricks early the next morning, my voice clear and firm, devoid of the usual waver he might have expected from an elderly widow. "Mr. Hendricks," I said, without preamble, "we need to go on the attack. I have information, and I need you to help me use it to expose Jason Thorne completely." There was a brief, surprised pause on the other end. "On the attack, you say, Evelyn? Splendid. I had a feeling you had more fire in you than you let on. Tell me everything." I recounted Martha's discreet findings, the 2 previous marriages with conveniently slight name variations, the quick divorces, the consistent pattern of financial ruin for the women involved. Mr. Hendricks listened intently, making precise notes in his neat, spidery handwriting. "Excellent, Evelyn. Excellent work. This, combined with what Robert foresaw, gives us a very strong position. We'll start by digging deeper into these previous cases. We need names, dates, court records, witnesses, if possible." Our collaboration became a quiet, relentless campaign. Mr. Hendricks, with his vast network of legal contacts across the country, began the laborious process of unearthing the details of Jason's past deceptions. He dispatched private investigators, old colleagues who specialized in forensic accounting and discreet background checks. They weren't cheap, but the cost was irrelevant. Sarah's future was at stake. Meanwhile, I tapped into a different kind of network, one forged not in boardrooms, but in the quieter corners of Robert's life. Robert had always had a knack for connecting with people from all walks of life. He valued loyalty and discretion above all else, and he often relied on unassuming individuals who possessed unique skills and access. I remembered Mrs. Henderson, a retired private secretary who had worked for a prominent family Robert had done business with decades ago. She was a master of information gathering, with an uncanny ability to find out anything about anyone, simply by knowing who to ask and how to listen. I dusted off an old address book, its pages yellowed with time, and found her number. She was surprised to hear from me, but her voice, though frail, held a spark of her old sharpness. I explained the situation to her, carefully omitting Sarah's name, framing it as a financial dispute involving a deceptive individual trying to claim assets from a vulnerable elderly friend. Mrs. Henderson, a woman who had seen her fair share of corporate skullduggery, understood immediately. "Say no more, dear. Give me a name and a few days. We'll see what crumbs fall from the table." Her crumbs were gold. Within a week, she had uncovered not just the details of Jason's previous divorces, but also whispers of unpaid debts, a shady investment scheme that had collapsed years ago, and a pattern of living far beyond his declared means. She even managed to get me a contact for one of Jason's former wives, a woman named Eleanor, who, according to Mrs. Henderson, was still deeply bitter and entirely willing to talk. The tension in my home was now a coiled spring, wound tighter with each passing day. My calls with Sarah were agonizing, a tightrope walk between reassurance and the agonizing secret I still held. She was now openly distraught, often crying, pleading with me to make this stop. Jason's manipulation had escalated. He had begun to subtly threaten me through her, suggesting that he might disappear with her if I continued to be unreasonable, hinting at a sudden move to another state. It was a cruel tactic, playing on her deepest fears of abandonment and solitude. I spent sleepless nights poring over the documents Mr. Hendricks's team sent, cross-referencing names, dates, addresses. My kitchen table, usually covered with cookbooks, was now buried under legal briefs and background reports. I felt like a detective, an unlikely spy, but the urgency of it all, the absolute necessity of protecting Sarah, sharpened my mind, focusing my every thought. Every piece of damning evidence we unearthed, every lie of Jason's exposed, fueled my resolve. We had enough now. Enough to shatter his carefully constructed facade. Mr. Hendricks believed we had a solid case for fraud and misrepresentation, enough to not only nullify any claims Jason had on my trust, but also to pursue legal action against him for his previous schemes. The last step was to decide when and how to deliver the final blow. Mr. Hendricks advised a controlled environment, a formal setting where Jason could not escape or manipulate the narrative. He suggested a pretrial mediation, or even a preliminary court hearing. But I had a different idea. A more personal, more devastating reveal. Sarah had to see it for herself. She had to witness his unraveling, to confront the truth of the man she had married with her own eyes. It would be painful, perhaps even cruel, but it was the only way to truly free her from his clutches. The stage was set. The pieces were in place. The reckoning was about to begin. The setting was not a sterile courtroom, nor a drab lawyer's office for a pretrial mediation. I had insisted on a more intimate, yet equally formal, venue, Mr. Hendricks's private conference room, adorned with the same rich mahogany and leather as his office, but with a large, polished table that felt like a battlefield waiting to be claimed. He had initially raised an eyebrow, noting the unconventional choice, but my quiet insistence, coupled with the detailed evidence we had amassed, had convinced him. Very well, Evelyn, he'd conceded, a hint of admiration in his voice. A private confrontation can often be more effective than a public spectacle, especially with the right leverage. Jason arrived with Mr. Caldwell, their usual bravado slightly muted by the unyielding professionalism of Mr. Hendricks's office. Sarah was with them, her face pale and drawn, her eyes red-rimmed and swollen. She barely met my gaze, a silent accusation hanging between us. Jason, ever the charmer, attempted a conciliatory smile. Evelyn, thank you for agreeing to this. I hope we can finally clear up this misunderstanding. His voice was smooth, but I detected a nervous tremor beneath it. He hadn't expected me to agree to a meeting like this, not after weeks of legal skirmishes. He had expected me to fold. Mr. Hendricks, a silent sentinel by my side, initiated the meeting with a clipped, professional tone, laying out the agenda. Then it was my turn. I began, not with accusations, but with a quiet, almost melancholic tone, as if reminiscing. Jason, Sarah, I've had many sleepless nights since this all began. Sleepless nights thinking about Robert and his wishes. And sleepless nights thinking about what true family means. I paused, letting my gaze sweep over each of them. Sarah shifted uncomfortably. Jason maintained his practiced composure, but I saw a faint flicker of unease in his eyes. You see, Jason, I continued, my voice gaining a subtle steeliness, Robert was a man who learned from his mistakes. Or rather, from the mistakes of others. He understood that some people are drawn to wealth like moths to a flame. And they will stop at nothing to acquire it. I leaned forward slightly, my hands clasped on the table, my gaze unwavering as it fixed on Jason. And sometimes, those people are very very good at hiding their true intentions. Mr. Caldwell, sensing a shift in the air, interjected. Mrs. Reed, if you have something pertinent to say, perhaps we should stick to the matter of the trust. Oh, this is very pertinent, Mr. Caldwell, I countered, my voice surprisingly sharp. It pertains to trust. And to betrayal. My daughter, Sarah, placed her trust in Jason, as did several other women before her. I nodded to Mr. Hendricks. He, with a quiet efficiency, began to project images onto a large screen at the end of the room. The first image was a marriage certificate for a Jason Thorpe and a woman named Eleanor Vance, dated 15 years prior, from a small town in Arizona. Then a divorce decree, showing Eleanor Vance stripped of most of her assets. Jason's face, which had been so carefully composed, began to pale. His smile vanished. This is outrageous, he blustered, pushing back his chair slightly. This is a smear campaign. This isn't even my name. Isn't it? I asked, my voice calm, almost conversational. The birth date matches yours, Jason. The social security number, too, after a slight rerouting to obscure the past. And the pattern, my dear boy, the pattern is identical. Mr. Hendricks then displayed another set of documents, a marriage license for Jason Thorne and Rebecca Sterling from Colorado, another swift divorce, Rebecca left with nothing. Then came a detailed financial report, meticulously assembled by Mr. Hendricks's investigators, showing a series of shell companies, dubious investments, and rapidly evaporating assets linked to each of Jason's previous marriages. Each document, each photograph of a former, heartbroken wife, was a blow, precise and devastating. Sarah, who had been watching in stunned silence, let out a small, strangled gasp. Her eyes, wide with horror, darted from the screen to Jason, then to me. The color drained from her face, leaving it ashen. These women, Jason, I continued, my voice now laced with a quiet fury, they all believed in you. They loved you. And you systematically stripped them of their dignity and their financial security. You are not a man of ambition, Jason. You are a parasite. Jason sprang to his feet, his composure finally cracking. This is slander. I'm leaving. Mr. Caldwell, we are not subjecting ourselves to this witch hunt. Sit down, Jason, Mr. Hendricks interjected, his voice unexpectedly booming, cutting through Jason's bluster. We have sworn affidavits from 2 of these women, detailing your fraudulent schemes. We have bank records, Evelyn's own testimony regarding your attempts to coerce her, and an independent investigation that paints a very clear picture. You will sit down and listen, or we will take this directly to the district attorney. The threat of criminal charges hung heavy in the air. Jason, defeated, slumped back into his chair, his face a mask of impotent rage. Then I looked at Sarah. Her eyes were filled with tears, not just of confusion, but of profound, agonizing betrayal. The dream she had clung to, the love she had believed in, was crumbling before her eyes. Sarah, I said, my voice softening, my heart breaking for her, this is why I couldn't tell you. This is why I kept quiet about the villas. Robert built them, protected them for us. For our family. He knew there would be people who would try to take advantage. And I had to protect you from this. Sarah's gaze finally met mine, and in her eyes I saw not just pain, but a glimmer of dawning understanding. She looked at Jason, truly looked at him, and the man she thought she knew dissolved into a stranger. His face was contorted with anger and fear, the charming mask entirely gone, revealing the ugly truth beneath. The room was silent, save for Sarah's choked sobs. Jason sat, defeated, his grand scheme exposed. Mr. Caldwell, seeing the writing on the wall, began to whisper urgently to his client, urging him to cut his losses. The battle was over. The truth, however brutal, had been unveiled. And in its wake, only shattered illusions remained. The meeting ended not with a flourish, but with a whimper. Jason, exposed and cornered, had nothing left to say. Mr. Caldwell, seeing his client's legal position utterly dismantled, quietly negotiated a swift, albeit humiliating, retreat. The demand for the villas was withdrawn. Any further legal action on Jason's part would be met with a barrage of fraud charges and public exposure that would undoubtedly ruin him entirely. He was given a choice: disappear quietly or face the full force of the law. He chose the former, slinking out of Mr. Hendricks's office with a broken spirit and a shattered reputation. Sarah remained. She sat at the long table, the empty chairs around her a stark symbol of the void Jason had left. Her face was still tear-streaked, her eyes vacant, staring at the polished wood as if trying to decipher some hidden pattern. I moved to her, slowly, cautiously, unsure of how to bridge the chasm of betrayal that now lay between us. I placed a hand on her shoulder, a gesture of quiet comfort. She flinched, then leaned into my touch, her body racked with silent sobs. "Oh, Mom," she whispered, her voice raw, broken. He loved me. Didn't he? All of it. Was it all a lie?" My heart bled for her. "My darling, he loved what he thought you could give him. He loved the idea of what he could take. That isn't love, Sarah. That's a transaction. And you, my beautiful, kind-hearted daughter, deserve so much more." I held her then, tightly, as a mother holds a child whose world has just been irrevocably altered. She wept, long and hard, releasing weeks of suppressed fear, confusion, and the crushing weight of a dream violently shattered. The days that followed were a blur of grief and slow, painful healing. Sarah moved back into my small house, her suitcase the only remnant of her brief, ill-fated marriage. She spent hours in her old room, staring out the window, listening to the birds, trying to recenter herself. We spoke little about Jason. The subject was too raw, too deeply painful. Instead, I offered her the quiet comfort of routine, homemade meals, long walks in the garden, the gentle rhythm of shared silence. Eventually, the initial shock began to recede, replaced by a quiet, simmering anger. "I can't believe I was so stupid, Mom," she confessed one evening, her voice tinged with self-reproach. "How could I not see it? All the signs were there, weren't they?" "You loved him, Sarah," I said, gently. "And love, sometimes, makes us blind. But you are not stupid. You are resilient. And you will heal from this." It was a slow, arduous process. There were still moments of profound sadness, of disbelief, of the agonizing realization that the man she had promised her life to was a complete stranger. But slowly, painstakingly, Sarah began to put the pieces of herself back together. She started volunteering at a local animal shelter, throwing herself into a cause that demanded nothing but her compassion. She reconnected with old friends, cautiously, tentatively. And in those moments of shared laughter and quiet conversation, I saw glimpses of my old Sarah returning, scarred, perhaps, but not broken. One afternoon, months later, as we sat on my porch swing, watching the setting sun paint the sky in hues of orange and purple, Sarah turned to me. "Mom," she began, her voice soft but steady, "the villas, you never told me about them." There was no accusation in her tone, only a quiet curiosity. I took a deep breath. "No, I didn't. Your father and I, we built those as our sanctuary, our dream. And when he was ill, he made sure they were protected. Not from you, my love, never from you. But from people like Jason. He knew how easily ambition could turn to greed, and how quickly a predator could sniff out an opportunity. He made me promise to protect them, and in doing so, to protect you, even if it meant you wouldn't understand at first." She reached for my hand, her fingers intertwining with mine. "I understand now, Mom. More than you know. You didn't just protect the property, you protected me. You saved me from a far worse fate." A single tear rolled down her cheek, but this time, it was a tear of gratitude, not of pain. "What are we going to do with them?" I smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile. "We, my dear, will decide. Robert always talked about using them for good, for philanthropy, for a place of refuge for others. Perhaps that's where our new journey begins." My quiet life had been irrevocably changed. I was no longer just Evelyn Reed, the unassuming widow in the house with the overgrown roses. I had been tested, pushed to my limits, and discovered a strength I never knew I possessed. The path I had walked had been fraught with deception and heartbreak, But it had led to a new kind of truth, a deeper bond with my daughter, forged in the crucible of adversity. The beachfront villas still stood, gleaming under the Florida sun, silent witnesses to Robert's foresight and my fierce resolve. Their value was no longer just in their millions, but in the lessons they represented, of trust earned, of the enduring power of family, and of the unwavering strength of a mother's love. Life wouldn't be simple again, but it would be real. And sometimes, fighting for that reality, however painful, was the most important thing a person could ever do.